I actually thought the first time they increased the interest rate, it was going to be a disaster. And we've even walked through that. So I feel like fundamentally my confidence in the market right now is at an all-time high, because what else can we get thrown at us at this point?
Welcome to The Flow, Real Estate and Money Show, a show focused on helping Canadians understand the different elements of real estate, mortgage, and finance. The goal of our show is to provide Canadians with the tools, information, and knowledge to have more success when it comes to their investing and real estate related decisions going forward. My name is Alex McFadden, and I'm your host. I can't wait to get you into the flow. Mr. Matt Scalena, we are so grateful to have you join the show here today. Thank you, my friend, for hopping on board.
Hey, I'm happy to be here, Alex.
Awesome. Right from the Vancouver Real Estate Podcast studios, right behind you. Although the light isn't on, what's going on there?
Oh yeah, you know what? It's a little, it draws the attention. I like it focused right here, so that's why I did turn it on.
And for all those listeners, we're talking about definitely Matt's face here. Wow, what a way to get started, Matt. Appreciate you popping on, man. The last podcast episode that we did a couple months ago now, we were just basically riffing on what happened with the Bank of Canada right before we had filmed a separate episode for your podcast. Listeners, before we go too much further, definitely go ahead and subscribe to Matt's podcast, Vancouver Real Estate Podcast. These guys, Adam and Matt, together, you guys are brothers and have been doing that for 8 years now, right?
That's right, 2016, early 2016. So yeah, we're going more than, slightly more. But it's been a while.
And how many? I was thinking about this today. I should have checked, but how many episodes are we in now?
That's a good question. Probably like well over 400 for sure. I think we're like 425, something like that. So we've been doing it just basically when we started. We made a plan like, okay, come hell or high water, we're gonna put this out once a week, and we've basically stuck to that. So it's like once every Thursday a show comes out, whether it's good, bad, or ugly, and we've been doing it ever since. And it's kind of an albatross around your neck in some regards, but it's been a lot of fun, opened a lot of doors, and it's been an ongoing education. So it's great.
So, I mean, I want to center around that because that journey has been 8 years from now. You've been in the real estate industry, you said, for 10 years now. So obviously you're very active as an agent. You have a team and have dealt with many transactions at this point right now. But the reality is you started this podcast just 2 years into your real estate career, right?
Right. Yeah, I feel like it was kind of a fake it till you make it at the start in some respects. So Adam, my brother, and my business partner, he was 5 years. So he was kind of a few years ahead of me. So when I say fake it till you make it, that's more myself than him. I feel like he was very active, and he was from the start, he was a very busy agent. So by the time I joined in 2014, he was kind of an incredible wealth of knowledge at that point. Like, honestly, thinking back, it's like, man, he'd done, well, I'd guess well over 100 transactions. I have no idea, maybe even a couple hundred by that point, and was very active and very knowledgeable. So the show wasn't a fake it till you make it. I kind of felt I had the fraud complex there for a bit. But the show, in a lot of the way we position the show, and I feel like it's kind of part personality and part strategy, is to almost always, and we're kind of trying to move away from this, but always have a guest. And the reason for that was twofold. One is it's really hard to produce content every week, and you're a prolific content producer. So I envy guys like you, Alex, who just have the energy and the ideas and the wherewithal to actually produce that much content. But for us, it was partly, okay, we'll bring on guests. It's a lot easier to call somebody or invite somebody on. And secondly, we thought of the show as, as a professional development kind of course that we created for ourselves, and the kind of calling card to get in the room with people that you probably wouldn't get in the room with if you just called them up and said, hey, let me take you for a coffee. So like the first couple of, early on, I mean, John Stovell, who's I think he was the head of UDI, huge developer. He came on early on, and it was like, oh my God, so we get 45 minutes with John Stovell where we basically ask him whatever we want. And we were asking him things like, all right, like your nephew's got $1 million. What would you tell him to buy? Like those types of questions where you can say to somebody who's super active in the marketplace, knows the ins and outs of the city, has a vision of what's going to take place in the city in a way that an average person or an average agent doesn't, and get him in a room and ask him whatever you want. So he's just one example of the type of people we had on. But so for those two reasons, we kind of positioned it as having a guest. And then, it didn't, I never felt like I had to be the authority. I was just the guy coming up with questions, and, I play stupid really well. So it's worked out.
Yeah, you don't give yourself any credit for anything, hey? I think that's it's genius, and I mean, you guys were obviously ahead of your time in terms of why you do it. I mean, I think you see more and more people starting podcasts now than ever before. Most of them don't make it past, I think the stats are something like 75% of podcasts don't make it past 3 episodes, and then it's like 90-something% don't make it past 10 episodes. So thankfully, we're past that. Woo!
Oh yeah, hey, congrats. Well, you've been doing it for years too, though. I guess in different forms or different names.
Yes, a couple. We've got a couple different shows, but this one's lasting, so we're going to roll with this one right here. But to your point, though, I think that's first of all really genius and really impactful. And depending on whether you're an end user listener to this podcast or someone in the industry or whatever you are, I mean, the idea that you could provide someone else a platform or a medium to be able to help them leverage, I guess, their education to get out exposure in exchange for the opportunity to ask anything that you want, as long as you're willing to do so, is massive. But I think to even go further back than that, the fact that you guys said right away, we're just going to do this no matter what, every single week for as long as we can. I don't know, did you guys ever discuss at what point you'd stop? Was that ever a conversation, or it's like, no, we're just going to go?
No, we never discussed that. I think in part because, you know what, the one thing about, and I feel like this is even probably maybe the same today, there was not, and if you go back and listen to our show, we did some things that I can't believe we did early on because we kind of knew no one was listening, like, or very few people were listening. And I feel like the pressure just wasn't there. So we were just like, I would say we can say with certainty now, in our office, we're surrounded by a bunch of people that are obsessed with real estate. We kind of live and breathe it 24/7. So the idea of like buying a couple mics and BSing about real estate on mics for an hour a week wasn't that difficult, and there wasn't a lot of pressure. So that's kind of the start of it. The first episode we ever did was just Adam and I, talking about why Vancouver was as busy as it was in 2016 and why we thought and pulled some stats and things like that. So yeah, it wasn't that planned, although we did know that to gain a following, you have to have some sort of rhythm and continuity. And there's nothing more frustrating in my mind than, and I've listened to podcasts. I feel like I've never been an early adapter to almost anything except podcasts. I think I started listening to podcasts in 2004, if you can believe it. And somebody that would release a show on Tuesday, then 3 weeks later on a Monday, then a month would go by and you'd be like, are they done? And then they'd release another episode. Like the actual rhythm of a show is pretty crucial. So we just decided to make sure we released it. And yeah, I don't know where it ends, actually. This market, there's always something to talk about. That's for sure.
Which I mean, I'm glad you brought that up, because through that journey from 16, was that right?
Yeah.
Were you starting?
2016.
Okay,
yeah,
so from 2016 to 2024, we've been through a little bit since then, hey?
We've been through a bit. It's just a bit.
I think we need probably a marathon to be able to cover that. 24 hours solid might get us through about a quarter of that time. But between there and there, I mean, you said at the beginning here, I got a chance to sit down, get these people out there, ask questions, educate myself by being the one who's learning, and I wouldn't say be self-taught, because you're learning from other people. I'd love to know, like, if you were to think back to kind of early days, like, was there a time, maybe whether it be right away, 6 months in, 12 months in, 18 months in, was there a time where you just started to realize that this information that you were picking up was really starting to have a noticeable impact on the way that you started thinking about real estate, whether as an agent or as a buyer yourself? Can you think back to, any kind of milestones that in your time?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know what? I would say there's maybe not like an aha moment, but I can definitely point to. So one of the things we've always worked with a lot of investors, and I feel like that we meet a lot of investors through the show, but that I think investors are attracted to the show because it's like we try and cover kind of all aspects of Metro Vancouver real estate and Vancouver, the city of Vancouver real estate specifically. So in some regards, like going back to that John Stilwell comment, picking the brain of the people that are literally building the city, like what does Colin Boza think the next 5 to 10 years looks like in Vancouver? Like that's very important for mom and pop investors in my mind. Mm-hmm. So there was like increasing just here's what you should be looking for. Here's areas that are exciting. Here's what people in the industry are talking about and are excited about. And that there was this growth that we were able to share with our clients and on the podcast. And so part of it was just a knowledge. But the other thing that I think has been, and I know there's a lot of podcasts that kind of celebrate entrepreneurs, and ours, I guess, is kind of tangentially celebrating entrepreneurs and kind of mindset and those types of things. But over the years, I feel like we've had certain people on the show that are so impressive in the way that they approach things and the energy they bring to things and the action they take. And an obvious case is Corey Wright, who now runs the Vancouver Commercial Real Estate Podcast. We had him on fairly early days, and I mean, he's a multitasker. He was texting the whole time he was on, and just over the years, having him back on, and now just working fairly closely with him on a regular basis, the level, the number of deals he's looking at and doing, and how much action he's taking on a regular and consistent basis in building up a portfolio and his net worth is inspiring. And I feel like he's just one example, because there's so many people that are so impressive in the city. So it's like less, in my mind, one kind of aha moment and kind of, essentially standing on the shoulders of giants. And we've been lucky enough to talk to so many people that are so impressive, both in terms of knowledge base, but also the way they approach real estate in the market. Yeah.
So basically getting a chance to really suck the energy, if you will, or absorb the energy, suck the energy, vampire podcasters, absorb the energy.
You know what though? It's like, and I think not to cut you off, Alex, but it's you're the sum of the 5 people you hang out with, or whatever that saying is. But even in the office, I mean, if you like, what I've realized is who you surround yourself and their pace and the way they're approaching things is like, it's impossible not to, like, it's more important. It's almost more important than anything else. And I'm thinking of a guy we work with who's just like, he has an engine that is, like he's going 100 kilometers an hour if everybody else is going 30, and it's just, you can feed off it. And so in part, it's like building teams and that type of thing is like surrounding yourself with people that move, that hustle, that are active.
Yeah, no question. I think, for a person who's generally listened to this, whatever kind of career they're in, whether it's real estate or non-real estate, and you're investing or not, whatever you're in right now, what you just said there is that same saying, whether it's about being around certain people and having that certain energy, is repeated among whether it's entrepreneurs or high performers of any field, or honestly, like you said, real estate investors that we talk to, like even people we talk to that are quote unquote, even like, junior or early stages real estate investors, like they're trying to get more information, more knowledge, and be around those type of people. So I think that's something that's factual and that could definitely be impactful for anybody in any part of their life, as long as they're looking at improving who they are or what they're doing as a person. So, I mean, first of all, like that makes so much sense. And that's really impactful and really interesting, a way that you approach that. I'm going to flip back to the real estate side of things for a minute here too, because from 2016 to today, real estate has changed and evolved every 2 weeks. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
It ever feels like it. It's like, well, every 6 to 12 months, there is some kind of new rule or legislation or tax law or guideline, or the market blows up or the world blows up, or, oh my gosh, like it's been 8 years in real estate has felt like an eternity. And that's probably not the normal occurrence in a normal 10-year cycle, but maybe it is. I don't know. So with that in mind, if we were to think back from then to today, and we were to talk specifically just about maybe how you approach real estate as it pertains to investing, like has your mindset changed around your desire to invest in real estate, either positively or negatively?
Oh, that's a good question. Over the last 8 years, you know what? I think there's a lot of people out there that would be talking about, even the Residential Tenancy Act changes that were announced. It hasn't even passed yet, but in the last couple of days, that are, I'm not going to rent out my basement suite. Okay, I'm out. I'm selling. That type of thing. So I think a lot of people would say probably negatively. In my experience, I think I'm just increasingly confident about real estate in Vancouver over the last 8 years, and there's a couple of reasons why. And I think when you had Adam on, like one of our kind of thesis that we've had for a long time is, invest in markets with strong demand that are supply constrained, and of course Vancouver kind of fits that model. It's basically the model. But one thing I would say over the years is that kind of bedrock confidence about Vancouver, I feel like has been challenged a million times. Like I can think, so 2016 we started the podcast. I remember I was on summer holidays when the foreign buyers tax was announced, and I remember getting calls from many different people it was like everybody was panicked, because even if you weren't working with foreign buyers or you didn't think foreign buyers were driving the market, perception is reality in a lot of ways. And it was like, that was like a hard punch to the market. And of course we know now, like there was a little dip and then everything got back to normal. But you think like that's one of potentially 12 different policy changes that I could talk about. The empty homes tax, the BC spec tax, now the flippers tax, the COVID, interest rates. Like I was once on CTV. They don't invite me back on anymore, but they invited me once or twice. It was years ago, but I was on with another kind of real estate personality. And I remember like at the time it was like, what's driving Vancouver prices? And and of course it's many things, but I was saying, we're supply constrained. And the other guest was saying it's interest rates. And I think, of course, interest rates, low interest rates, like everybody you talk to when you think of low, and of course in the mortgage industry, it's like everybody's talking about monthly carrying costs if you're looking to buy a home, right? Like how much is this going to cost me per month? And of course interest rates matter. But if you would have told me we were going to be at prime of 7.2 for however long we've been at there, a year or 15 months or however long we've been at 7.2, I, along with everybody else, would have said the market would be carnage, right? Like I actually thought the first time they increased the interest rate that we were in for like a real, fire sales. It was going to be a disaster, and we've even walked through that. So I feel like if anything, fundamentally my confidence in the market right now is at an all-time high, because we've kind of like what else can we get thrown at us at this point? And I don't have the stats
just
in front
wait.
of me. Yeah, but I was just looking at a house in East Van that we have coming to market, and you're like, man, this market even over the last year is like we're up at 7.2 prime. It's like it boggles my mind. But so yeah, I would say just from an investing standpoint, there's a lot of noise and a lot of it always seems negative, but fundamentally I'm very glad to be in this market, and I'm excited to continue to be active in this market.
Okay, so overall positive. That was a great explanation. Yeah. Overall positive. I mean, I'm grateful for the way that you got there and the way that you explained that really clearly. And it's like, okay.
Was that actually clear? I have no idea.
This tax came in, and then this tax came in, and then I did that, and then but there's another tax. I don't know. Don't try and keep up with the taxes, my friend. There's always another tax. We're not going to make this about that. We're not going to make this about that and go too far into it. But I think the resounding feedback that I got from you was that in spite of this, we're still going. We're still going strong. We're still going forward. Property values are still up, generally speaking, year over year, especially in this particular city. And in spite of all these different guidelines and changes, there are still financial benefits to investing in real estate as a whole.
Just to not put too fine a point on it, but there's been all those things, whether the foreign buyers or the empty homes or whatever you want, or interest rates, whatever, pick your poison. They've all kind of worked over the years to obscure that fundamental thesis that we've had and a lot of people have had, that we just don't have the supply for the demand. And it's very, very difficult to build that supply for any number of reasons. And that new supply coming online is very, very expensive, right? And it's not getting any cheaper. So I feel like, in a lot of ways, that thesis that is actually a very simple supply and demand thesis actually won out over all sorts of potentially more complicated or convoluted or, phantom reasons for our real estate market being the way it is.
So moving, I guess let's push that forward to today now, and we'll push that conversation in terms of the real estate investor and or somebody owning real estate in this market, whether it be as their primary investment, primary home, whatever that might look like. Okay, we've faced these different guidelines and taxes and COVID and up and down, and now we're obviously up in this high prime market, obviously hoping to see things start to work their way back down in the near future. You just mentioned supply and demand. Just recently, not to date this too much, but we saw a potential renters bill of rights announcements for $1 billion to build more apartment buildings. We're also apparently, according to the news, going to see mortgage changes in the upcoming budgets, which might have already happened by the time we record this or post this. Regardless, it's like the short-term rentals, the flipping tax. I'm getting to a point right now where it's like, how many more, in my opinion, and I don't even want to make this too political here, but there's so many things being thrown at the fan, and it just seems like, first of all, it's not all for naught, but it seems now like more than ever what I'm seeing it happen in the marketplace is it's causing confusion for consumers, which ultimately doesn't stop people from needing to buy a house, but causes a higher amount of stress and makes people not get interested. And so like what I saw is obviously, when the market was hot, there's a lot of people that wanted to get invested in real estate. The last couple of years, less and less and less and less and less. This may not be shocking to hear this, but the people that I'm seeing still investing for the most part now are those who are doing it, have done it, and have experience in it. And it just seems like that separation keeps going further and further apart from the haves versus the have-nots. Have you noticed that experience or anything like that from your side? Long way to get there, but we'd love to hear
no, actually, but that's a really good point. I think there's no doubt that the interest rate environment, whether you're an investor or looking to get into the market, it's just made it really, really difficult for everyday Canadians, right? And I think in a lot of ways, it's like you keep seeing the headlines about it being the least affordable moment in Canadian history to buy a house, which is saying something. But I do think it's increasingly separating the haves from the have-nots. And, a lot of people have said on our show over the years, and I'm not saying, because I feel like anytime somebody says this, the Manhattan analogy is like Vancouver's not New York. We all know that. There's all sorts of differences, including not a lot of head offices in Vancouver, blah, blah, blah. But one thing's for sure, I think it's just increasingly going to be, normal to rent your entire life and be a renter for most people. And I think the people doubling down right now have pretty deep pockets and they're doing so for the reasons that we've kind of outlined here. But it's tricky to think of how that really changes because and everyone's talking about more supply, but interestingly enough, the supply that's coming on is nowhere near the amount of supply we need to really move the needle in terms of pricing. And it's really hard to imagine a moment where that changes, right? Like it just seems like we're so behind the eight ball and there's a lot of talk about and rezoning and a lot of talk about building more, but it doesn't, the time when we're like, man, we built our way out of this, it's so far outside the pale of reality to me that I think, what we're talking about here is it's increasingly haves and have-nots, and it's just the reality of the region, unfortunately.
You brought something up there. You said the renter situation. You think that in maybe 10 years from now, people will have a mindset of I'm just going to rent for the rest of my lives because they've already been renting for 10 years or 20 years and they don't see an outcome that's different than that. And this is a conversation that is floating around, not just in Canada, but also in the US and is present in other parts of the world. Obviously, if you go overseas, there's many cities and communities where homeownership is not a possibility. It is not a dream. They don't have access to easy lending and easy money. But in Canada, it always has been the case, at least traditionally in the last 50 years, where people, their dream is to buy and own their home. And you're right, the values are changing. I personally don't want to get too much into my beliefs, but I can't see how any of the changes right now are actually helping people own real estate at this point right now. In particular, obviously the substantial amount of funding, although required for building and construction, we need rentals, we need units for that because not everybody is going to be an owner or wants to be an owner. You're right. The reality is most of the money that's going out right now is going into building units for rentals that aren't really appropriate for families or homeowners. And those people who want to own a piece of real estate are not seeing a substantial increase in supply. Moving that forward, that does obviously bode well for the quote unquote investor, depending on any other taxes or anything of that nature. Do you believe, like truly, and I'd love to push into this, do you believe that we are going to become a nation of renters? Is that where we're going?
I don't think a nation of renters. I think increasingly in Metro Vancouver, that's probably the case, is my thinking. I was just on the prairies. I was actually in Winnipeg. It's funny, they have the same conversations there with houses that are $450,000. I don't understand it. But talking about how everything's gotten so expensive. But I can't imagine that. It seems like the Canadian dream of owning a home is very much alive, or should be, in places basically starting at the Alberta border, at least to Ontario. But yeah, I think it's part of our culture to want to own your own home. I think it's an amazing, if you're lucky enough to own your own home, I think it's easy to understand that level of even just security around knowing that you're not going to, it's not going to go for sale. Unfortunately, part of our job is selling tenanted homes, and it's actually it's literally the worst part of what we do. You hope an investor buys it, but quite often you're giving bad news to somebody who's lived somewhere for 3, 4, 5, 8 years, however long. Hey, somebody's bought this home, they're moving in themselves. You have 2 months, and best of luck, essentially. And it's a really terrible thing to have to do. But it's that want, I think, will remain. But in a place like Vancouver, it just strikes me as so far gone for 50, 60, 70% of the population, really. Unless you have family money, which there's a lot of in the city, but it's not evenly distributed, as we know.
No doubt. And to your point around the Metro Vancouver area and those communities, no surprise to see people deciding to migrate to different provinces and different areas of the province. And I think that's obviously a trend that's going to continue as long as things go. In fact, to leave off on that point, I was talking to someone from, like Mackenzie, BC or something like that, like a very small town. And she was saying to me, oh yeah, I have a young couple moving to purchase a home. Houses up there are like $250,000, right? They're moving from Calgary because Calgary is too expensive these days. I was like, what? Oh my gosh. Okay. Where are we even going with this here? Because obviously the people that are moving from Vancouver, they're like, let's go to Langley, let's go to Chilliwack, let's go to Calgary, let's go to what? Mackenzie. Oh my gosh. Like, this is what's going on. And I guess so, for as long as people are willing to make the move, they're able to start owning in those different types of communities. But that does fundamentally change the way that real estate works when most of the major cities are owned by quote unquote landlords and or investors, or those who are the haves, so to speak. And then it's all the small communities for those who don't. But interesting observation.
Yeah, well, and it was a long time ago on the podcast. This is not my line, but somebody said, and I guess hybrid work has kind of changed this potentially a little bit, or from work from home. But it was a compelling line that I never forgot. Flin Flon, Manitoba has the most expensive real estate in Canada, and the logic being that the opportunity cost of living in Flin Flon is so high that, you know, that it's the most expensive real estate, even though it's probably 125 grand. So yeah, I mean, it's one thing to be moving further afield into secondary markets and smaller towns, but I think, you know, what are the opportunities in Mackenzie? I've never been, but it's hard to imagine. Like, I mean, the opportunity cost of buying a home there seems too high for most Canadians, I would imagine.
Hopefully work online. And
yeah,
it'll be okay. All right, so looking forward, we obviously started off a podcast, talked a little bit about what you've learned, and then the current state of the market. I mean, if we were going to kind of look down the road here, I'm going to separate this into two different questions here because I'm curious on your thoughts here. First of all, in the real estate world right now, obviously with everything in flux right now, what kind of trends are you looking out for in the next 3 to 6 months? What do you think that might change or might happen, or what are you hoping might change or might happen in the marketplace? And this is an open, free-for-all question.
Okay, what I'm hoping might change, and this is maybe a little self-serving, one of the things that's kind of surprised me is how the legs of this kind of the COVID move to the suburbs and secondary markets seems to be, you know, and basically chasing affordability in a lot of ways, I think is kind of part and parcel of that. A couple years, if you would have said to me 2 years ago, you know, would Chilliwack be, you know, ultra busy right now, which is my understanding is it's really busy, I would have probably said, you know what, that's COVID has led to this big push to the outskirts, and we're going to see a move back to the city and to downtown. It hasn't really happened yet. As a lover of downtown Vancouver, I feel like it's kind of price point wise, it's been kind of flat since about 2018, which strikes me as an opportunity, in part because I think most things are selling for below replacement costs. But I do think, you know, the downtown's still a very vibrant place, but to me, it still hasn't regained kind of what it had pre-COVID, that there's a slight difference in energy. And I'm hoping that, you know, that it becomes it's still a destination, don't get me wrong, but it becomes more of a destination for people looking to move back downtown, because I think it's a fantastic place to be. And I work downtown. I live close to downtown, and COVID has left its imprint. So I'm hoping that's kind of self-serving in some ways, but as a guy who lives and loves Vancouver, that's my real hope. And I'm surprised because I do think it's a great buy right now. Honestly, downtown Vancouver is a market that is not very busy still. And if you compare those prices to Brentwood, Surrey City Centre, Coquitlam, even, you know, I live in East Van, Nanaimo and Broadway, there's a bunch of pre-construction there selling for about $12.50 a foot. You know, it's like, and it's moving quicker than a lot of stuff downtown that's on a price per square foot. It's not brand new, but not old good buildings for less on a price per square foot. It's kind of like, it's a little mind-boggling, and I don't think it's going to last forever.
Interesting. We'd have to unpack that for a long time to figure out why that's going on there, but good point. And I'm sure our listeners are probably going to be happy to hear that. Maybe reach out to you and ask you more about the price per square foot, Matt. Switching gears, going back to the educational piece, the podcast piece that we started the conversation off on. Where are you guys going to go next here? Like, what is the evolution, or what's changing, or anything at all, really, from the show?
With the podcast? You know what? I wish I could say we had a roadmap, and we'd maybe be better off with one. I feel like the way we've really done it, and I'm hoping this is why it's you know, relatively well received, is I feel like its trajectory is we've followed what we're interested in. Let's put it that way. So I feel like we started off with kind of the nuts and bolts questions. We're always keen to talk to economists. We've had some really great urban planners on, some developers, some real estate investors. We're trying to kind of thread all of our interests into the podcast, and I feel like we're going to continue along that route, whatever seems interesting and of the moment. And the questions that we're asking and the types of guests we're getting on now, I think we try and keep it, not have 7 developers on in a row type thing. So it's a wide array. But the questions are different now because we're in a very different moment. I mean, like how many times did we talk about CPI prints in 2017? It wasn't really a topic of conversation, but at the same time, I'm pretty sure the fall market's going to be very different than this market is my expectation. I think it's going to be a lot busier in the fall. And I think the questions that are going to be asked will be different. So I wish I could say I knew what those questions will be, but we'll see. There's always something new to talk about.
Hey, man, a good answer is just give me an answer altogether. So you guys are going with it, adjusting with the market, talking about what you want to talk about, and sharing information that you want to learn about. So nothing wrong with that.
Hey, I could have said that. I could have said that in about 2 seconds by the sounds of things. No one said I'm not long.
I like your version. It goes into more detail. I appreciate your time, Matt. It's been awesome and a pleasure to have you on the last one. We're going to send people over to the Vancouver Real Estate Podcast if they haven't already checked it out. Any last parting words, my friend?
No, we'd love, if somebody's not familiar with the show, we'd love to have them on board. We have our team here in Vancouver. We're always available and excited to help. And if somebody wants to hear you on our show, though, I think we've had you on twice and they were fantastic episodes. So that would be a good place to start. And no, thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Yeah, everybody go over there and vote for Alex on the podcast again if you're liking this. It'll be 3 times in 1 year. Maybe it'll be a record. No, I'm just kidding. Outside of that, guys, appreciate you listening. Thank you so much, Matt, and we'll see you next time.
Take care.
That was an unreal episode of The Flow. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did on my side right here. If you haven't already done so, make sure to check out all of the incredible resources that we have available. You can find us on Instagram at Flow Mortgage Co. You can find us on our website, getflowmortgage.ca. And of course, don't forget our free first-time homebuyer masterclass that's currently available on our website for anyone who listens to the episodes. And if you loved what you listened here today, the only thing that we ask for is to share this with someone else that you think this could help. And hey, maybe leave us a great review online.